this genealogy. Let's look at some of the people Matthew lists. In general, he's listing men because, again, the legal rights pass through the men from father to son. But Matthew lists 4 women, and I talked about these as I was reading it. He talks about prostitutes. He talks about murderers and people that had adulterous affairs. He talks about Gentiles. He talks about people that were enemies of God. The reason he does that is he wants to show us it doesn't matter who we are or where we come from. God still wants to use us. He used all of these women to bring about the Messiah, to bring about the salvation of mankind. Despite what they were, despite what people thought about them, despite the fact that they wouldn't be welcome even today in a so-called good church, God said, these are the type of people that I want to use. And those are the kind of people we want to bring in here, that we want to go through this. The very people listed show how amazing it is that Jesus was able to come when and where he did. Think about that. Jesus came to a specific place at a specific time that had been foreordained by God. But he had to use all of these different people, the type of people that you would normally not associate with God, to make that happen. Our next verse is verse 18 through 25. And it says, this is how Jesus the Messiah was born. His mother Mary was engaged to be married to Joseph. But before the marriage took place, while she was still a virgin, she became pregnant through the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her fiancé, was a good man and did not want to disgrace her publicly, so he decided to break the engagement quietly. As he considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream. Joseph, son of David, the angel said, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child within her was conceived by the Holy Spirit, and she will have a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All of this occurred to fulfill the Lord's message through his prophet. Look, the virgin will conceive a child, she will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. When Joseph woke up, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded and took Mary as his wife. But he did not have sexual relations with her until her son was born, and Joseph named him Jesus. So Matthew continues his focus on Joseph and the legal link that Jesus has to claim to be the Messiah. He's looking at what happened with Joseph. He doesn't focus on Mary's story like Luke does. He says, what happened to Joseph? How did Joseph play a role in this? How did Joseph come to be the adopted father of this Jesus? He wants to show that Jesus had the right to the throne of David. He's already established through the genealogy that Joseph was the heir to the throne of David. Now Matthew shows us that Joseph is not the biological father of Jesus. Rather, Joseph found out his soon-to-be wife was already pregnant, even though they hadn't consummated the marriage. So, in order for Jesus to be sinless and to be God, he could not have an earthly biological father. That's a key point here that he's saying. He's saying, okay, Jesus did not have a father like everybody else. He did not have a biological father. Joseph is not his father. And we saw that at the end of the genealogy. He said that Mary gave birth to Jesus. And so now we're seeing that here. The prophecies in Genesis make it clear that one day a man would come who would be born of a woman, but not the seed of a man. And that is how that man would avoid sin, because the sin is passed down from father to child. And it is in every generation since the seed of Adam. God said to Adam, every descendant you have will have sin in their lives because you have chosen to sin. So the only way for one to be born without that sin nature was for one to be born without the seed of a man. And Matthew's making it clear here that is what happened. Matthew tells us that man is Jesus of Nazareth, who became the stepson, or maybe a better term would be the adopted son of Joseph. He had the legal right to Joseph's estate into the throne of David because he was adopted into the family of Joseph, just as we are adopted into the family of Abraham. We are adopted when we accept Christ and become joint heirs with him. That is how Jesus became an heir of Joseph, by adoption, not by birth.
Did they have to do that legally like when we do it today?
I'm not sure how that happened. I'm sure there was probably some kind of a process there, but he became the legal heir as the firstborn of Joseph. So we know that Joseph could not have been the biological father of Jesus if Jesus is truly the Messiah, because sin is passed through the father to the children. Every person who's ever lived after Adam and Eve was born with a sin nature. As soon as you were born, it was guaranteed you were going to sin. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We all do things wrong. We all do things we shouldn't do. And as we go along through this, I'm sure I'm going to do lots of things to make you mad. But that's just the way we are as humans. But the only way for someone to be the Messiah, to be truly sinless, was to be born without that sin nature. So Jesus lived for 33 and a half years and never once sinned. If Joseph had been his biological father, that would not have been possible. The only way for Jesus to be sinless and born without a sin nature was for him to not have an earthly biological father. So here, Matthew is setting the stage for showing that Jesus is not only the son of David, but he is the son of God. So we also see here what type of person Joseph is. He tells us something about this man that God picked to be the adopted father of his son. He shows us what his nature is, what kind of person he is. There's a reason that God chose Joseph and Mary to be the parents of the Messiah. They truly lived for him. They wanted to do something for him. They were true faith believers. They didn't talk about it and then do something different. They did what they had learned. They lived the law to the best of their abilities. So here, as Matthew goes through the verses, we see that Joseph was engaged to be married to Mary. But they had not actually come together and been married. Mary was still a virgin, as was required for the mother of the Messiah. So, then, all of a sudden, Joseph finds out Mary's pregnant. They've never even been alone together. They've never even held hands, Alan. They're about to be married, and they legally are married, and they never even held hands. Are you going to be able to say that, Alan?
Or at least you need to bleep this out.
Alright, but now all of a sudden she's pregnant. Well, of course, his first thought is, she's been with somebody else. It doesn't matter if this is a 12-year-old girl. His thought is, she's been with another man because she's pregnant. And so he wants to divorce her. And the way divorce worked in that way was, the woman ended up dead. No ifs, ands, or buts, the woman was dead. That's how they handled divorce in those days.
That's so wrong.
The punishment for adultery was to be stoned to death. And they still carried that out in Jesus' day. Of course, one of the problems with that was they always let the man go, and it was the woman they stoned to death. It takes two to commit adultery.
It says in here that he did it like in secret.
He wanted to do it in secret, and that's what we do. What he wanted to do was to have her sent away somewhere. You know, her and her family move away to a different town, and she would live with her family the rest of her life and not be with anybody. He wanted a quiet, non-public divorce that wouldn't shame her, and it also wouldn't lead to the religious leader stoning her. He had the right to go before the religious court and say, she committed adultery, I want her stoned to death. But he's that type of man. He said, I don't want to do that. You know, I don't want to see somebody else stoned to death because they made a mistake. I don't want to see her and her family shamed, so let's just arrange a quiet divorce. She can go off and live by herself, raise her child, and that'll be the end of it as far as I'm concerned. And so, you know, he was an honorable, God-fearing man, and that's why he wanted to do that. He didn't want these bad things to happen to her. So now,